Welcome back to Tell Us About. Today we are joined with Sirgog. He is a content creator who covers the Path of Exile news, and he also does in-game things, sometimes super serious, but sometimes more lighthearted, and he just screws around and has some fun. So you should really check out his channel. Thank you for joining us today, Sirgog.
Thanks for having me on, mate.
So we're going to start with, how did you get into gaming and Path of Exile?
Okay, so growing up in the 80s, I had a Nintendo, Super Nintendo in the 90s, that sort of stuff. But I got a lot more into gaming in 2007 when someone got me to try Dungeons and Dragons Online. I don't really recommend this game anymore. It's gone really pay to cheat since then, but it really hooked me into online gaming in a big way. And then eventually, as it started getting more and more down that pay to cheat wing, so it went more and more down that pay to cheat line.
Mm-hmm.
I started looking around for alternatives, and having played Diablo 2 and really liked it when it was new, like 9900 era, I thought, oh yeah, let's give this Diablo 2 alternative a go. Now, originally I was hyped for Diablo 3, but then they announced the Real Money Auction House, and I'm like, no, just pay to cheat garbage. We'll go play this other game instead. And then, yeah, I got hooked. Basically, started playing Path of Exile 2013 and have been playing it ever since. Initially at a pretty casual level, then from Parandus League onwards, I've always gotten solidly into endgame every league.
Gotcha. And what do you think mostly hooked you in about the game?
I think there's a few things. Firstly, it's one of the few games that has a really honest monetization system that's just you don't have any of the sort of rubbish that you see in other games, like pay for a cheat code to skip this content, pay for an XP boost, pay for direct character items and things like that. There's none of that. I do think Path of Exile is a game that you do have to buy eventually because you will need stash tabs, but it's sort of a free trial to level 85 and then it's buy to play. Other than that, the cosmetics I don't have any issues with, and I bought quite a lot of them. So that was the first thing, was the business model. The second thing was the first playthrough experience. I went into Path of Exile knowing nothing about it and knowing nothing about how to build a good character. This is in the days where Piety was the end boss, maybe Dominus had just been introduced. And so you would do Acts 1, 2, and 3. And then once you completed Act 3, you'd be set back to Act 1, and you'd have to do it all at a higher monster level. And then you would do that the second time, that'd be your cruel run. Then you do it a third time on merciless difficulty, and then you would get access to maps. So essentially, Acts 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 were replicas of 1, 2, and 3, but at higher levels. And my first character got through Cruel, really struggling, and then was not able to beat Merciless Oak. They just could not do enough damage. They were too squishy, so they'd have to dodge Oak's attacks, and then I couldn't out DPS his regen, and so that was the end of that attempt. The character was terrible. It was a Viper Strike Shadow. This is before Ascendancies, that had almost no life nodes. But I had an absolute blast just trying to make it work for as long as I could.
Well, those life nodes, they are lava, so you got to be careful.
Well, I seriously thought, I'm playing a DPS character. I'm not playing a tank. I didn't know any better. And so I was like, oh yeah, I don't need them. And then eventually, after I started realizing I'm hitting a brick wall, I was still having fun, but I realized I couldn't progress past this encounter. I thought, okay, I'm going to do some research and come back with a second character that's better. And then I followed some guide that was far better the second time. And I actually still recommend that approach to this day to players. Give it a go. Your tolerance for how long you're going to keep having fun when you're failing, it may be different to mine. It might be less. But once you stop having fun, walk away from that character and then come back following a guide. But first approach at the game, just give it a go completely with no information and see how you go. Go for as long as it's still fun.
Well, you could learn a lot failing, right? So
Yeah, that's where a lot of the things that you learn, and then also it just feels so different the second time when when instead of taking 12 hours to get through Acts 1, 2, and 3, you're doing it in 4. And it's like, oh wow, this is amazing. This is so much faster now. But it's the foundation that you built based on that first run through, and that first run through was fun.
yeah, and it's experience that you can't really get back, not knowing anything at all, right? Once you know stuff, you just there's nothing like it. Nothing like
You can't unlearn stuff, and the only way I can get that feeling of struggling all the time back is by playing events like Gauntlet or something like that.
Yeah,
Not necessarily as hard as Gauntlet. You can play a private league that's more forgiving than Gauntlet, but that is still designed to be far harder than the core game.
yeah, but you still know all the little tricks and stuff kind of to it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly like, well, what is this? It's just really nice to throw yourself into a game and have no idea what's going
Yep.
on and if am I doing a good job. I don't know. 20 hours Act 1, that must be a world record, right? Stop
Yeah.
and kill every single monster. Were you one of those people? You kill every monster instead of like killing the packs. One of the like signature things when I don't prep my friends. That's what they do. They go and they kill every single monster.
So I not only did I do that, but I repeated zones as well.
Ooh.
So I would full clear. I would full clear when I was trying to progress, and then I would repeat zones. Now you did need to repeat zones a bit more than you do now. There's been a few changes to the flow of XP when you're leveling, and nowadays you don't get any benefit from doing that. But back then, yeah, it did feel more important to do that because you didn't have your ascendancy, so you were just lower power than you are now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, what sort of characters are your favorite types to play in Path?
I would answer that by saying that the number one answer is always something that is wildly divergent to what I played the last league. So if I've primarily played a trapper this league, so my answer for next league is going to be something that is as far from a trapper as you can get. It's not that I dislike trappers, it's that I like variety. So who knows, maybe I'll play something like Cold Dot next league, because it's something that just plays so completely differently. And in terms of archetypes that I've had fun with, particularly in the past, I would have a slight bias towards playing Raiders, just for the move speed.
What's
But
your
that's
favorite skill that you've ever played at its strongest point?
mechanically, I really like Val Fireball. It's a little hard to get it to work at the moment, and well, at least in tier 16 content, it's like it struggles with something. You can't seem to make it work for everything. But
Mhm.
Valve Fireball, whether focusing on the hit or the ignite, but particularly the ignite, it just feels incredible. And I have played it 3 times, including twice when it's not good, because it just feels so different to everything else. You've got a standard skill in terms of just your fireball aspect of it. But then you've got this massive ability that you've got the ability to use semi-frequently that just has devastating impact and is really incredibly noticeable. I've also liked Val Ground Slam for the same reason. Again, I think the answer is going to really come down to Val skills where both the normal skill and the Val version are compelling to use and where they both scale the same ways.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons Lightning Strike has been so popular as well.
Yes,
In
yeah.
addition
I've
to
tried
it
like
hitting twice.
work as well for me fun wise, but it is definitely a good example of a skill where both the default version and the Val version are great.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite mechanic that you've encountered over all the leagues that they've introduced?
Would it be reasonable to say divination cards here? Do you consider them a mechanic or do you consider them loot? Or do you mean something like a
Well,
league mechanic?
I meant more league mechanic, but actually, like that'd be like something that they added to the game. That's cool. But you could tell us why you like divination cards. That's fine. Whatever you want to do.
All right, well, let's start with firstly divination cards, then we'll get to a league mechanic afterwards.
Okay.
The reason I like them is that they create ways, firstly, for massive treasures like a headhunter to be broken down into small pieces that you can,
Mm-hmm.
you can start farming those small pieces. Then at some point you can say, all right, I've got 26% of the patient cards that I need to get a headhunter. And I have a whole bunch of currency. I'm just going to buy the rest of the pieces I need. So you've got that as one major thing to it. The second thing is that they often produce items in fairly large quantities that otherwise almost wouldn't exist because there's a high opportunity cost to create them. What I'm talking here is things like the divination card, the Arrogance of the Val, which creates a random 2 implicit corrupted unique item,
Mm-hmm.
or things along those lines There's a number of divination cards for 3 implicit synthesis items that were added recently this league, and they just create, as a trade league player, they create some exciting treasures that otherwise probably wouldn't exist because people aren't going to apply all of their, well, the tiny number of synthesize this item crafts that you get. They have such a huge opportunity cost that you can't just use them on a random ring. But here you've got access to that ridiculously powerful craft, except it's used just on a ring. And then you can craft it further from there. Or with the 2 implicit corrupted uniques, you get things that otherwise just might not exist. So that's something I like as a trade league player. If I was a solo self-found player, then they'd just add a number of options that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. So you also were asking though about league mechanics.
Yeah.
And yeah, for a long time I would have answered Delve. I think I have just gotten to the point that I'm sick of Delve now. It's an excellent mechanic, but I really like it. Probably because it provides you with it controls the pacing for you. And that just is something that changes the feel of the game. Heist attempted to do the same thing, and I like Heist. I know that a bunch of people will disagree with that. I like Heist, but with Heist, it has a weakness, and that is that you can outgrow it.
Mhm.
Whereas Delve, you can't really outgrow in a league. You can't build your character up to a point that you trivialize all Delve content the way that you can with Heist. And so yeah, they're some of my favorite content. And I've been liking Breaches this league though. Breaches and Expedition this league have been my favorites in very recent play.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Logbooks and Expedition. That's probably my favorite one that they've ever introduced, actually, despite
Yeah, they
it
got
being
them
the worst league.
I liked 315. I had a lot of fun in 315.
Oh, you're
But
gonna get more hate for that. Ripping
no,
off, tearing
uh,
off some band-aids, some old wounds. I hated 315 so much, despite liking the league mechanic itself.
I think the reason that I like 315 was because I have more fun when I'm playing content that I feel failure is a realistic prospect in. So, for instance, last night I fired up a hidden, and I'm playing on a character that's not particularly strong. I'm like, right, I'm just going to see if I can do this. I don't know if I can or not. I forgot that I had the +2 tiers to the Maven's Crucible on, and I had a couple of nasty mods on it. Anyways, I ripped it. I failed 6 bottle failed it, but I had a lot of fun doing that. And if I was playing carefully, I would have rechecked my passives and gone, oh, I'm not going to keep this at level 85 and also have minus max on it. I don't think I can do both of those together. So let's scour the invite and then run it. And then I would have had less fun. I would have won, but I would have had less fun doing it. So that I think is one of the reasons I like 315 is that by virtue of nerfing players so much, that is essentially equivalent to buffing monsters enormously. I think they got everything right. There were things like the day one mana situation was bad.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking on that in general or why that needed happen. It was seemed like some band-aid to slow the game down, kind of, that they were. That was just a really weird thing. Like I don't know. I don't know what they're going for that. But my biggest problem was not them. They took away a lot of ways. Like I think back to the days like freeze and stuff used to be a big deal. There wasn't tools, and then it changed everything when they added the flask. They're just like immune all the time and stuff. But it used to be like a reactive thing way back. But them like killing a bunch of the tools after they made it to where like you can't react in time almost for some of the stuff. I felt like
Yeah, they got the
like
balance
you know,
right later.
yeah, like now it's
315
fine, but they screwed the pooch on it. I think in 315 initially, or from my perspective at least.
I thought it was difficult. Like again, I was playing in softcore, so that's quite different. If you're playing in hardcore, then you have to play a lot more carefully. But I just found that I was being more careful in general, and I'm
Gotcha.
fine with having to be more careful. I didn't feel like I was having really unfair deaths. That said, I did change. Like I did build around the fact that I was wanting to stay out of close range combat. I think 315 environment would have been terrible for someone that was definitely set on playing a strike skill, because of the consequence of being frozen. Like, you're going to get frozen more when you're in close range. I was
Hmm.
like, all right, going to play a totem build because I want to be able to control distance in fights, and freeze was a big part of that. Also, not just freeze though. Expeditions other mechanics too. Expeditions, 10-second bleeds, 10-second poisons, all those sorts of things. I was like, all right, I just want to be suffering less hits than usual in this environment, and therefore ended up playing something that was a safe play style.
Gotcha. Earlier you mentioned divination cards. What are your thoughts on the stack decks?
I think at the moment, so here's what I would like to see done with stack decks. Now, this is maybe controversial, but I think that items that are generated from stack decks, like, oh well, divination cards should not be eligible to be opened from a stack deck until they've dropped from their normal place 10 times within the league, or until 72 hours from league start, whichever comes first. So in private leagues, that would mean that all the rarer ones would it'd just be 72 hours until they're available. Reason for that would be to make sure that very early on, the first, say, Dying Sun, the first Dying Sun goes to someone from killing the Shaper rather than someone that runs a whole bunch of heist and trades for it. But late league, I do like them. I think they're just something that's a bit of an exciting little game to play, but I don't like their impact on week one of a trade league.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's been
Um,
discussed several times. I don't really
yeah, I think
care either way on it. I don't think it matters so much where I'm
I
sitting
mean,
at.
these heist drops too many of them, and I say that as someone that likes heist. The drop rates in heist should be nerfed, and if that
Interesting.
means some of the players that run heist without enjoying the content end up leaving heist, that's fine. They can
Hmm.
find something else. They'll have more fun playing. I think that Archnemesis got it pretty right. It's like, you have a malediction, and you use it as the first one of your 4 Archnemesis. Your map is probably going to give you 4 divination cards. Use a Shikiri touch. I think it's Shikiri touched, or is it Arakali touched? One of them that converts everything into divination cards. There are rewards. You're gonna get more, but usually you don't get them. Only if you go somewhat out of your way to focus on them. And yeah, you don't like. I think that there's probably too many that drop from heist.
I didn't do a single advanced pattern to that degree, so I have no
Oh,
idea. I did mostly like low ones. I'm like, I'm not doing this stuff. Maybe like I would have designed Arch Nemesis completely differently. I would have like let just people pick up 16 of everything and then drop the level probably and just let people make whatever they wanted so they could
so
run it, and then I think I would have interacted with it.
yeah, I think that the inventory was too small with it. Firstly, let's say what I think should happen to Archnemesis as a system. I think it should cease to exist in rare maps. Well, rare maps as in, it should cease to exist in normal maps, and they should generate 1 or 2 unique maps. That, let's say you have 2 unique maps. One of them put at tier 5 rarity, so I think that's the same as Maelstrom of Chaos. Drops
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, and it has a bunch of pieces that are some of the bottom 2 tiers. So you might encounter a Stormweaver, which is a bottom tier. You might encounter a Storm Strider, which is a second tier. If you're unlucky, you might encounter a Magma Barrier. So that's all pretty basic stuff. Then have a tier 2 or 3 rarity unique map. So tier 3 being the same rarity as Coward's Trial. Tier 2 is unprecedented for a map, but it's the same rarity as Chevron's Wrappings. And this would have 4 or more arch nemesis that are from the very top ones. So you might get Innocence Touched, Treant, and Temporal Bubble, and something else. And this would keep the exciting fights in the game, but wouldn't have all of the rubbish. And you'd be able to pick from a bunch of different things. So if you really hate fighting Temporal Bubble, or you really hate fighting Effigy, for instance, which everyone hates fighting, then you just would ignore that one and you pick something else instead. I like the fights. I do not like the inventory management at
So
all.
where in this scenario, where would they actually be able to put it only in the unique map? There would be
Unique map
monster.
only.
Okay, interesting.
And you just encounter a pack, and instead of it being like, you have, say, slave cage thing, um, that is an Archnemesis that you can then put your own token from your own inventory in. Instead, it would just be like, here's 8 different monsters that are already possessed by an Archnemesis. Pick which 4 you want to free and in what order.
Hmm.
Fight them all. Map is done. It's really simple, and it would just be something that's a lower scale, like a less complex unique map, which we haven't had added to the game for a while. And maybe it's on the Atlas, maybe it isn't. Maybe that changes from Atlas to Atlas. I don't think there's any reason that you need to have the exact same set of unique maps on the Atlas every league.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting idea. Or maybe even you don't even get to choose the organs. You go to each one and you choose 3, kind of like what they did in Ultimatum. It's already set up on the monster. You get 3 choices on each
I like
monster, and
that.
you get four of those, and then you do it in whatever order that you want. So you go look at them and kind of see. Then you like choose those. There's just
See,
or
say
maybe
first
even
one.
more.
Do you want to fight Solaris touched? Do you want to fight Innocence touched? Or do you want to fight Katava touched? And that's your first one. And then the second
Yep.
one might be, and you don't need to do that first. You can do it whenever you want. And then the second one might
Yeah,
be,
whichever order they. Yeah, something like that might be really interesting way to go with it as well. Yeah.
yeah, I really like that. And you could have other monsters in there. It doesn't need to be just that. I think the idea of just having 2 versions of the unique map, one that is going to be not very special at all,
Mm-hmm.
something like the Strand map or like the Maelstrom of Chaos, super common, super cheap. Anyone that wants to play with the system can trade for as many of them as they want and run them all day. And then you have one that's a bit more special. Might end up trading for the same value as a Cortex in Trade League.
What are your thoughts about during the temp leagues, the balance of the league mechanic and the profitability relative to everything else in the game? You think it should be same level or the most profitable thing, or where do you stand on that?
So my general approach is that I want a situation where players don't feel pressured into doing content that they don't feel is fun. I want to take as an example of this, actually, not Archnemesis, but Essences at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you find Essence content fun or not, the first thing you do when you're setting up your Atlas is you get all the Essence stuff in at the moment. That's it. That's for a trade league anyway. You have to do them because they're better than anything else on the Atlas passive tree. So I don't want to see that system replicated with temp leagues, but I do think that they should be fairly strong. And then you have a situation where most people play the league mechanic because it's shiny and new, and the people that try it and find they actively dislike it walk away from it and don't feel like they're missing out on something essential. They'll miss out on some specific pieces of loot, but they'll be able to trade for them from other people. And the people that really like it, then they don't feel like they're missing out on other content in the game. They don't feel like, oh, I really like this Archnemesis system, but every time that I run a map and do it, I feel like I'm missing out on the currency in Heist or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That they feel like they should be pressured into doing. You can't necessarily get this perfect, but I do think they should go for a balance where the systems are reasonably comparable. One of the difficulties with doing this, though, is that a lot of the systems have hidden complexity. And so, to take for an example with Archnemesis, early on, there were a few strategies people found that were reasonable for Archnemesis. My first one that I had success with was Mirror Image, which is 1 Scarab plus 2 lucky rerolls as the
Mm-hmm.
first thing. Then as your second thing was Treants. Then as your third thing was Anything, and fourth thing Anything. That was the first thing I found that was good. The second thing I found, and it was better than that, was using Temporal Bubble as your first step instead of Mirror Image.
Mm-hmm.
Temporal Bubble gives you an Expedition reward and a Heist reward, both of which could be quite good. So, you'd get a Burial Medallion if you're lucky for the Expedition reward, and the Heist reward, if you're lucky, you'd get a Blueprint. More often, you'd get 500 coins from the Heist one or a contract, and you'd get, say, 2 Astragalis for the Expedition reward. But in any case, it was quite good. And then you would fork that with Treants as your second one. And then your third and fourth would be things that were cheap things that gave a lucky reroll.
Yeah.
So this strategy was a big jump up from the mirror image strategy I'd been using earlier. as you can no doubt tell. The thing is, should GGG balance the loot? Because like everything about heist is known. We know. I'm just taking heist as an example here of just content that's fairly lucrative that some people like and some people don't. Everything about heist is pretty well known and documented now. So players that are running heist on day one of the league, they know the sort of currency they're going to get, and it's going to be the same as they're going to get on day 14. However, players that are experimenting with Archnemesis on day one are going to get much less than they're going to get on day 14, because by day 14, much more is known. And this is the really difficult thing to balance that I don't think GGG can solve this problem. I don't think a solution exists. So unless they were to be more transparent about the rewards structure in advance, but then that takes away the fun of discovery. So I don't have the solution, but I do think that we will see a system where a lot of these league mechanics will be very hard to balance against the rest of the game.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is sometimes an issue is GGG likes to put in little Easter eggs, and they very much feel that they want to hide stuff. They want people to be excited about stuff and discover it as part of the mechanic. The problem is that gets tedious very quickly. Like, it's cool for the first little bit, and then all of a sudden it's not cool anymore. Everyone kind of knows about it, and then it's just tedious and dumb. So I feel like sometimes the balance is off there between, like, okay, it was initially really cool. Like, I don't know, they should patch it like 1 week in after enough people experience it, or however long it is. But I feel like the Archnemesis, like, that's one of the ways that they really screwed up the thing. Like, the patterns, it should have been in game. Like, 1 week later, you should have been able to, all right, you did whatever patterns, people discovered whatever thing. Okay, it should just tell you every single one, so you don't have to go to some third party thing to figure out the combos. Like, okay, the wonder's over, guys. What are your thoughts on that stuff?
Like, I had all of them, but Effigy found out by day 5 or so, and Effigy turned out to be the very worst of them all. And it's like the hardest of the fights and the least, very unimportant in terms of loot. But I had everything except it's discovered really quickly, and then there was no way I was going to discover Effigy by myself.
Gotcha.
One of the pieces in it, I would continually upgrade past it every time I got it, and as a result, I just would never find it. And so, yeah, I agree. I think they repeated a lot of mistakes from Bestiary 3.1.0, where there was a lot of competing demand for specific resources. So in Bestiary, for those that didn't play 3.1.0, a lot of the recipes for crafting required the sacrifice of 4 specific rare beasts. And some of these recipes were miles better than others, and they would require the same beast as each other. So you could have a situation where by using I'm not sure that it was this, but let's say using Create a Random Rare Amulet would use the limiting reagent for Split Beast or something like that. And so you'd have this thing where you'd be wasting something genuinely precious. And that turned out to be the case with Frenzied being one of the rarest Archnemesis tier 1 things. And so you would find that it was very hard to complete recipes that required Frenzied unless they were the simplest recipe with Frenzied. Because you would always have, I think Frenzied and Gargantuan might have been a recipe. I could be wrong on that, but because you would never not have Gargantuans, and they had a fairly good reward, so you'd be picking them up, you would find this situation that you always had Frenzied and Gargantuan to use together, and that meant that you would not keep Frenzied in your inventory, and therefore you wouldn't find the other recipes you were missing.
Yeah. Yeah, that, but I mean, also, like, I don't like having to use all these third party outsourced things too. And I know a lot of people are like, well, we've done that since all the time, or look at WoW. But I don't like that argument because, like, WoW had internal add ons. Yeah, you were downloading it, but it actually had, it wasn't a separate program. And a lot of people aren't programmers, so I mean, there'll probably be some day where someone goes through, makes a legitimate looking thing, and then puts some sort of malware on everyone in the entire community. That's a huge vulnerability.
It is. I've seen that. I've known of that happening. When I was doing some research on a video on some of the things that cheat sites do, I talk about the people that facilitate cheating through selling exalted orbs and things like that. And I was putting out a video on why players shouldn't do that. And one of the things I'd found was from research into old school runes, not old school RuneScape, actually RuneScape back in the day. So before there was old school RuneScape, one of the popular fan sites got compromised like that, and like a whole lot of players wound up with keyloggers on their accounts. And then at some point down the track, there was a whole lot of items stolen from accounts that were linked to that fan site. On another occasion, people would create logins on a fan site, and they would then use their login and password, and their login would be their email address, or maybe they just told to give their email address. Now, those email addresses, the other party, like the dodgy fan site, would then try and log into the email address using that same password. And some people's email addresses were compromised that way, which is an even worse situation than having your game account compromised. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of things where pushing people to external resources ends up being a varying level of potential malware threat, but it's definitely real. I agree with that. That's definitely a problem.
And that's usually not discussed when people bring it up. They're like, "Oh, well, it's okay to do that." Well, I don't know that it's okay. It just takes one popular tool, especially because they're open source, and then someone doesn't have the time, and there's all the pressure at the league rush. It takes one time, one popular tool gets compromised by one open source dev person that someone hid something, and whole community is compromised.
Yeah. Or at least the ones that don't have the programming knowledge to have or at least the general Windows OPSEC knowledge to pick it up at the you might be able to protect yourself individually, but there'll be plenty of people will get compromised. Like if Path of Building got compromised, for instance.
Yeah, that would be absolutely devastating because almost everyone's using that for sure. Yep.
Yeah, and even if there's a it's not some serious exploit, but it just tries to get you to enter your password somewhere, like that's going to get a percentage of the player base. It's not necessarily going to get everyone, but it doesn't need to get everyone to be devastating.
Yeah. And then the overall other thing that I really don't like is that the trading site for softcore is very inconsistent. It's just like last league, it can't handle the load. I don't know if they were getting DDoS again, but it's just down for entire days randomly where you can't search. It's like, what?
Are you talking about pathofexile.com/trade? Or are you talking about PoE?
Yeah, pathofexile.com/trade was down sporadically during the first week for 8-hour plus periods.
Yeah, and during American peak.
Yeah.
For me, doesn't matter, but for you is the most important time.
Yeah. But that sort of thing, like you can't trade or just even the lag and stuff behind trading when they have so many. It's not really practical to go to a site and then search, and then even for the currencies, they go too quickly with the amount of players that we currently have. Like I don't think.
I think one of the big factors is bad faith listings as well. It's people posting a listing that they have no intention of honoring, and for in order to intervene into the game economy in various ways. And I've noticed that there was a concerted attack on PoE Ninja along those lines. I won't go into any details of how it's done, but I have tested exactly what people are doing, and they will often, like for a period when the fair market price on simulacrums was 0.75 to 0.8 exalts, they had PoE Ninja reporting that they were 0.45 to 0.5. And this was sustained for an extended period, like we're talking 3 or 4 days. So people have figured out how to break a lot of these community tools. And like this isn't the compromise situation we were talking about before, but this is an example of a tool being compromised, not in the IT sense of someone has your credentials to log in, but in the sense of it just simply not working the way it's meant to, and because of the direct actions of bad actors.
Yeah.
That's it. It'd be a huge can of worms to try and find a solution to that, because any full-on, like, if this game were to implement a trade market along the lines of, say, EVE Online, which is a game, again, another one that I don't recommend anymore because it's gone pay to cheat, but that I used to really like. EVE Online has an extremely high turnover player trade economy that's extremely fluid, extremely fast, with one complexity, and that is that it doesn't teleport items. So if you buy an item from someone in place X, you have to go to place X to get it, or you have to find someone else to transport it from place X to where you want it. But other than that, you have an extreme amount of automation in what you're trading there. So I could list, if we were to just transfer things into Path of Exile terms, I could list my Sacred Orb for 72 Chaos Orbs, and you could then place a buy order saying, I'm listing my 66 Chaos Orbs for one Sacred Orb, and then someone could come along and fill either of these offers if they had the appropriate currency, and it would be instantaneous. So, if someone comes along and fills mine, they get the Sacred Orb instantly, I get the 72 Chaos instantly. So if you were to have that in Path of Exile, I think you would actually end up with the game in an even worse state than it is now, because so much of the drop rates are based around trade being awkward. I think I would like to see that sort of instant trade on consumables, but I would not want to see it on items.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. But it's sometimes I log in and I don't want to play the game because I don't want to buy the necessary currencies to roll my maps and do the thing. And I think when you get to that state, that's not
That's
good. It's like it's too much work to do the trade so that I can run the thing that I want. So it's elk and go for life now. That's what I think.
I had a tab that was listed at 27 Chaos recently. I just left this stuff for sale, stuff that I have very little expectation will move. And I changed it to 6 Awakened Sextants because trading for Awakened Sextants was such a pain. And I need a few to complete endgame grinds. I don't quite have enough to get the 300 map completion, the 300 quad sextant maps done that are banked up. And so I was like, all right, I've just got to trade for these things. And I just keep approaching people. Hey, you're listing 40 Awakened Sextants for an Exalt. Do you want to trade? And just silence. Hey, you've got your Awakened Sextants sold. Do you want to sell me 40 for 160 Chaos? Silence. And so I was like, all right, no, I'm just going to sell stuff instead in the item I want. And that's something that is frustrating to have to do.
Yeah. It just takes so long. It's busy work, basically.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the sake of busy work, because what? So the game keep you playing or whatever, but you're not really even playing the game. You're just trading. You're playing people not answering me. Call people on phone like logistics officer. You know what?
Yeah.
That's a paid job in real life. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And the other thing that's really frustrating with it is that it makes you like every interaction with other players that I have in Path of Exile that's negative, probably 99% of them are in trade. If I'm trading, I find maybe my interactions are 50% positive, 50% negative with other players.
mm-hmm.
And if I am playing the game with other players, I would say that they're 99.9% positive, 0.1% negative. When I say playing the game with other players, I mean things like I will often just set up a public group and just start running content. I was doing it a while ago. I wanted to get my 100 Shaper Guardians done for the endgame grinds this league, and so I just posted a group, Shaper Guardians for endgame grinds, and AU server. That's what I posted. Got random people join it, and started out, I was carrying the group pretty slowly. Then we got someone that was ridiculously fast. We're just going, and this person was killing Hydra with six player hit points in, quarter of a second. And
Interesting.
so we're just blitzing through as a group, and we're sort of chatting a bit, try to keep up. Some people are trying to do Archnemesis along the way to get the 1,000 Archnemesis endgame grind. Eventually, we just say, no, we can't be bothered with that at the moment. We'll do that separately. But this was an example of a really positive experience with other players. Highly recommend to other players. If you think the game's player base is toxic, try this rather than trading and having that be the only time you interact with players.
What do you think
Anyway.
about grouping in general? in the game, because for me, I think that the game is too fast to enjoy grouping in a lot of cases, where you're just kind of like, the people who are lagging behind are mostly playing like pick up the loot and not really interacting with the game.
I think that the situation with grouping is that if you are doing content that is at the right difficulty level for your group, it is an amazing time. However, this content doesn't exist for most groups. If you take 6 players that are level 90 quad ascended and are at the lower end of the player base that meet that level 90 quad ascended that sort of level, that bar, the people that are just over that bar but not far past it,
Mm-hmm.
and you put them into a group and you got them running Shaper Guardians, you will find that the gameplay will devolve into what you're talking about. It'll just be blitz through, blitz through, blitz through, and then struggle on the boss possibly. But the actual map will be too easy for them. And it's really difficult to find content except on day one of a league. Day one of a league, if you can get a group together, and especially like this is why Badger Private League is so awesome. People that haven't played it, it's this is Badger as a streamer, and he runs a private league on the 5 weeks into each league, and you go into that. You'll be in it's a team-based environment, but the teams are large, and you'll be competing for various things. But what you will do is you will often be running content because it's a 4-day event. You will not reach the point that you're too powerful for the content, and as a result, you'll be having a blast in party. But that's not the way that that's not the way that most hours of the game are played in Trade League. People just are too powerful for the content, and then you end up with exactly what you're talking about. It's one person runs the content, 5 people follow.
Yeah, basically, which is
Or
quite a
two.
bit different than other games. And even like, one of the things is I recently played Diablo 3 with one of my IRL friends who doesn't know life gaining, and the ability for him to keep up and actually contribute, in Diablo 3 versus what it would take in Path of Exile is quite a bit differently. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
Path of Exile should go to that. It just made me think like the group play kind of sucks.
Yeah, and I don't really know the solution because it's one of the things with Path of Exile is that there are so many force multipliers that experienced players have and that new players don't have, and you're trying to find the right way to balance these against each other. So, let's say, for instance, you and I were grouping together, and we were both playing a. Let's say we're both playing the poison dagger builds, so using pneumatic daggers or the like. Because we both know the game, we would run different auras to each other. I'd be running Malevolence, and you'd be like, all right, well, Wrath. Wrath will do.
Mm-hmm.
Wrath is better than just being having your Malevolence be in the shadow of mine, or vice versa. So we will both have the effects of both Malevolence and Wrath, because they help both of us, even though Malevolence is objectively the better aura for us. So that's something we would know to do. But if you had 2 new players that were following a guide, they'd be like, oh, well, of course I just keep Malevolence on because that's the best aura for me, or best offensive aura.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, Determination and Grace. If you're playing by yourself, Determination's the right one to use for most builds. But if you're playing in a pair, one runs Determination, one runs Grace. At least that's what happens if you're both veteran players. And so there's this extra force multiplier that kicks in there, and that really, really, really makes it messy to work out how to balance anything in parties. If everyone's a veteran, then the party hit point bonus on monsters should be enormously higher, and also monsters should get an action speed boost. But that would be completely unfair on a new player, or a group of new players together. So, yeah, it's I don't envy GGG trying to find a solution to that at all.
Yeah, for sure. That, like, I think the solution is pretty much just slow the entire game way, way down. But then everyone, like, they can't do that at this point. Like,
Yeah, I think they've got
revert it
like
all the way back, that they would just kill their game entirely. So the only solution is like you have to have meaningful encounters all the time, that people can't just like boom one tap or some content with that. And it's just, it almost always plays like that. Or you can get such an extreme power creep even without what you're mentioning, to the point where people can build characters that will delete things on 6-player HP, no problem. All the bosses by themselves, they don't even need anyone's help. Being able to get to
Yeah.
that point, like, then what do you do? So
Yeah, I kind of feel like something that'd be interesting to see would be a new large multiplier of monster hit points, kind of along the lines of delirium layers. So I don't know if you've researched the formula for how delirium works, but basically, delirium X% provides X times 0.96% damage reduction to monsters. So delirium, 50% delirium is 48% damage reduction to all monsters. 100% delirium is 96% damage reduction to all monsters, which is equivalent to 25 times their base hit points.
mm-hmm.
So that is really significant. And that is something that slows the game down a lot, but it's unsustainable. And it has to be unsustainable because the loot's so high on it. I would be curious what it would feel like if they had a second layer, like a second scaling layer like Delirium, that players could opt into that didn't have as much in the way of rewards as Delirium does, but did have some rewards, and that could, allow players to then ratchet up the content they're facing to not just to the moon but to beyond.
Yeah.
Delve, I think, was an attempt to do that, but I think the fundamental underlying mechanics of scaling monster damage as fast as they do was a mistake.
Yeah, it's not an easy problem to solve, so we're not
No.
harping on that. I definitely, like you said, I don't envy them trying to figure that out. It's different players that want to group and not group. But one of the things that I wish is that guild stuff mattered more, and stuff and partying mattered more in the game. I kind of wish that. I think it would be better for the community overall. The fact that I don't feel like it's a good experience when people are one-shotting things and that guilds don't really matter as much. I don't know if you would add guild content or like what you would even do for that, like what the place is. But that's also why I really like the Badger private league when I played in it, because you shared items, you're working towards like a guild goal almost, right, with collecting everything in a short period of time.
Yeah, and it's actually a private league I've got in mind is vaguely along those lines at some point. I was thinking of doing it this league, then I realized I needed to take a break before the next league. But I'm thinking of having some sort of mentor league that I'd run at some point. I've just got to work out the exact details, but essentially you'd look for one team of players that have beaten Eternal Lab but haven't beaten Shaper, and a second tier of players that have beaten Shaper but haven't beaten whatever you consider to be an equivalent step up, like maybe Harvest Enriched Lab, maybe haven't beaten I think Uber Elder and Maven may be too big a jump after Shaper, maybe Cyrus. And you'd have a group of mentors, and their goal is simply to get as many of the people that have got Uber Elder experience, sorry, not Uber Elder, Eternal Lab Azaro experience, up to the point that they can beat Shaper solo.
And then that would
And
be the scoring for the team, basically. How many people on your team killed Chaper or something? That's an interesting.
People solo kill Shaper on your team, and then the other team be the people that have done Shaper. How many of them can solo kill Izara?
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of, yeah.
That's interesting.
Not, I mean, just keep saying the wrong thing. You know what I mean? Cyrus. I think Cyrus is a leap up in difficulty from Shaper.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could say Maven's Invitation the Formed is the other option. Big jump up from Shaper, but not tremendous.
Well, it's hard for me to know because I usually kill them pretty easily because I know the game well enough to do builds that, despite me not being good, can just destroy them, right?
Yeah,
I don't know that I honestly, I don't know the mechanics to a lot of the fights entirely, and I can't even do the mechanics, but I've killed all the bosses. You don't actually fully need that if you have strong enough builds.
So something you should try is going into these bosses without a powerful character at some point, because they are so much more interesting to try that way. I know that at the Black Star this league, I went into the Black Star with less than 150,000 DPS and with very low defenses. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to figure this out. I'm going to rip as many sets as I need. I'm gonna learn how the fight mechanics work, and I'm gonna make it work. I got it down. It took me 6 portal failures, and then on the 8th, I got it with 4 deaths, and it was the most fun I've had all league. Like, it was absolutely, absolutely amazing.
Gotcha. But I don't really care about that so much as figuring things out, putting together a build, and testing the stuff for other people and making sure that they can do it. So I
And
don't
that's
really,
difficult.
huh?
That is a difficult balance. Is making the the balance between having fun and creating content for people is a difficult balance to
Well,
get right.
I find creating the content for people and making sure that they can do the content more fun than actually doing the content myself. So like
Yes.
what you described there, okay, it was a lot of fun with the thing. That's like a nightmare to me. But you just have like the complete opposite. I'm like, you ripped whatever sets, unacceptable. Maybe that's just my pride or whatever, or time invested that I ought to put in. You know what I mean?
I mean, they were the Quest version, so it's very easy to
I'm
get
trying to
back.
think the last time I even like ripped a set. I can't remember one in the last year or so in any of the ones that I've ripped a single set. And
Yeah, I ripped it last night because I was like, all right, I'm gonna try this rare. I'm gonna try this rare, and I forgot that I had the level 85 upgrade on the Maven Crucible allocated
oh,
from.
I know something that I ripped. I full ripped Vernas, or the ice one of the Sirius Guardians. I did a thing where I made sure to force all the torment spirits, so she got 5 tormented spirits on a super juice map, and then
Yep.
she deletes you. My character is very like, it was like crazy. Like, I'm talking about like instant full screen, comes down, slams you type stuff that you're supposed to avoid. It's like you have no chance, or just tornadoes, or does it, the barrage goes too quickly because of the projectile speed. It was pretty nuts. But outside of that, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, tormented spirits are no joke ever.
Yeah, with those. So that was like that, or like some really, really. I usually know what like I can do and don't do.
Yeah.
I usually like to do pretty like I like to do El Cabal and go on maps. And I'll die a lot, and then I'll get my character to a point, like I'll get enough loot, and then I get my character to a point where I could just kind of do that content, and then I don't die, usually. So that's about like the level that I play at.
Now, speaking of Viling maps, you've obviously done it a lot this league. Do you have any feelings of how rare Vile Temple is to get? Because I was running a bunch of Vile Temple.
I have lots and lots of them, but I don't like running it. I have no idea.
Have you tried the new one? It's so much fun. The silly
I don't like the boss. Like, it's really hard to make a character that can do the boss, though. So
boss on a character that's not designed for them.
Yeah, because it's just so much. If you get the rain thing, if you kill them in the wrong order, it makes it really, really difficult. And that whole barrage where the fizz things are coming down, it kind of just deletes you, even if you have like 90% fizz. Huh?
Karjai has to die first, no matter what, or second, but ideally first. You never want her to be third. That's the thing
I can't control that on the builds that I play.
Decoy totem, you'll be able to.
No, mine, like the builds I usually play, nuke the entire thing, and what happens happens.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like you're playing a spark or something like that.
Oh,
right? Yeah, or ball lightning strike or whatever. That it's like you put them down. You could be strategic with that in the corner, but if you put down the ball lightning strike and they just run into it, they're dead. If you play at the damage levels that I have, so like I don't have control over a lot of that stuff. So I'm gonna die several times if I do that kind of.
Yep, yeah. But the rest of the map is so fun now with all those stupid chests that are added in there. That's I highly recommend people give it a shot if you haven't run a Vile Temple in 3.17.
Yeah, it's very yeah, that part was fun, but the bosses is what keeps me from not doing that ever. I hate that boss.
So I did it a few leagues back on a squishy character. I was like, right, I'm just going to do a bunch of these. I'm going to get the boss right. And I did succeed in leveling from 92 to 94 on a very squishy character in Vile Temple, doing the boss every time.
Gotcha.
Everything is dodgeable, but it does take a bit of practice.
Oh, I got a good question for you. How many characters do you play in a league? Like, how many different builds usually?
Varies. Usually 3. We'll find.
3. Okay.
So not all that many. I think a lot of players do a lot more than I do. And normally, what will happen is I will plan some league starter, and I will think long and hard about it. Then I will see something that looks interesting and different, and I will try that. And then I'll make something in an event like Badger Private League, migrate that over, and I will often choose my class, not my ascendancy, but my class in BPL based upon something I might be keen to play.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Uh,
but my content is very much tied because I'm build guide guy a lot of the times. We're sharing that stuff, so usually it's like 6 that I'm playing. I mean,
yeah, so I'm
sometimes
guessing
it's
you'd
more.
make each week for the start, and then
Basically, I've farmed everything in 10 days. Or back because I was going back to work too. So in the first
yeah.
10 days, I farmed almost all my currency for the league, or a good half of it for almost the entire league. And then it's a matter of doing different builds. Or sometimes I've even leveled like this last league. I leveled 3 characters in the first 10 days, all to level 95, and had them
Oh
ready
wow.
to go to try to put like a content push together. Like I had all
Yeah.
the gear bought for all 3 of the main characters that I was going to do content on for like 4 weeks worth of content.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that burns me out really, really quickly, unfortunately, too.
And that's a difficult balance to find. And
Yeah.
one of the things I find difficult is that I don't usually enjoy doing the axe that much, except at the league start environment and in a couple of just oddball scenarios. But playing the game under the core rule set, I find the axe too easy, and nothing burns me out more than playing a game that's too easy for a long time.
Yeah. I just,
So
after my first one I did, I just followed Firegrass's build guide for the Hollow Palm.
yeah. Hollow Palm
And then,
definitely
and,
does.
and then just did that for the next 2 to fly through in like 4 or 5 hours. And then jumped into 5-way Legion for a little bit to get to like 90s. And then I like to play the character quite a bit in the 90s to get a feel for it. Otherwise, I can't really tell people how good it is or what to do. So I
Yeah,
spend
that
a
is
lot of
really
time like play testing the build. Otherwise, I don't think it's fair.
yeah. And I find I generally like to level as the character I want to play. Obviously, you can't always do that, but I like to level as the character I want to play because that way you learn things that are important to know for the character, and you
Mm-hmm.
get to just experiment with things. Like there's always flex slots on a character. You know, what's better on this build? Is it to have cast when damage taken molten shell, or is it to have manual cast molten shell? You know, that's sometimes that's
I'm
going to
lazy,
be
so it's always cast on damage taking molten shell because I'm not going to hit the button now. It
yeah.
depends. Sometimes I put it on walk, left click, so it auto casts itself. One of those 2
I'm
things are happening. I can assure you, unless I have to put Withering Step on my left click because I'm using a dagger. In which case, cast on damage taken, molten shell. That's the way to go because it's too many buttons. I mean, some of it's getting old, and I'm not hitting the buttons or zoning out. Or if I play long play sessions, or I'm distracted, or I'm streaming and I'm reading chat, like I'm not gonna be hitting molten shells manually all the time. You know what I mean? I guess.
I usually just use it for suspected incoming big damages. Like if I'm like, oh, this is actually potentially going to kill me,
Mhm.
then I'll manually cast it. And something I often do actually is I'll run a CWDT level 4 molten shell. Level 4 being the lowest mana cost. So levels 1 through 4 are the same. And you got to be careful there. If you've got +1 fire skills or +1 all skills, then you want to stop your molten shell at 3/20 instead of 4/20. And so you'll have that. That'll cost 20 mana when it goes off. Or you can go 22 mana at Gem of Light. And then you will have a manual cast level 21. And that's the other thing that I'll sometimes do. And so I'll have both of them on the same character. If I anticipate damage coming in and Molten Shell's off cooldown, great. I will manually cast it. And it's just like using a life flask, except you do it before you get hit. And if I don't anticipate it coming in, then CWDT kicks in for me. If
Gotcha.
it's off.
And
If
I
it's not
I
off,
approach it to where I try to build my character so that it doesn't matter what spike coming in, like the character just doesn't die, and I don't deal with any of that. That's my goal.
Yeah.
But I
I
use the
think I
game more as like a prop, where like something I'm doing in the background, and then I'm interacting with people in chat and stuff. That's how I approach
yeah.
in general. Or I'm often doing, answering people's questions on Discord while I'm playing or something. So I'm pretty distracted and
Oh
never like
yeah.
fully focused on just playing the game anymore. Like I'm always
Yeah.
multitasking. So it's harder. Like I used to do that sort of stuff, but now that I try to engage a lot more, it's pretty difficult.
Yeah, when I'm streaming, I will try to pay attention to the chats that are coming in, but I'll have like my sort of a sliver of my focus on chat, and so I'm just sort of watching the quantity of chat that's coming in rather than actually reading it. And that's if I'm in a tense situation in game, and then as soon as I've killed the pack, I'll be like, "Oh, okay, that's what I need to respond to." But I'm aware of the presence of a chat before I can actually read it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So let's start talking a little bit about content creation, how you got into content creation. So when did you start making content, and why did you decide to start making
Okay, so I fell into this by fluke. Uh, I had set up like I used to play Magic the Gathering a lot, and
content?
I set up a blog for that because the nature of Reddit, the way that the way that the internet works these days, anything you post is very quickly fades from anyone's ability to search for it. So I set up a blog, and at some point I decided, oh, why don't I just look into what's involved in recording footage? Because I remembered I had a couple of things that had come up that were seemed like they'd be an interesting video, and so I thought, oh yeah, I'll just try and catch that. And I set up OBS. I didn't have sound on it, and I was like, I just recording gameplay from MTGO, Magic the Gathering Online, for a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I posted a couple of games up to YouTube solely for the purposes of embedding them on my blog. Almost no one saw them, of course, as you would expect. And then that sort of just got me the very basic technical skills of how to use OBS, well, mostly how to use OBS. And then 2018 comes around, and I just have a really stressful period in my life. Like for most people, the most stressful year of the last few was either 2020 or 2021. For me, it was the period that went from like August, September of 2018 through most of 2019. Actually, it was just a really stressful time. Uh, Work was getting stressful. I had a relationship breakup, and then just a whole bunch of other stuff happened. My parents got quite sick, both of them, about the same time. So just sort of going through one of those times when I was sort of withdrawing a bit and thought, oh well, why don't I just play Path of Exile more for starters? And then I'm like, why don't I make a video on how I got a headhunter?
Mm-hmm.
An incursion league happened and I got a headhunter in it. And I was like, oh yeah, there's some information there people be interested in. I did this and I posted it on YouTube, and it sort of exploded a bit. Not in the sense of going truly viral, but I think it had something like 15,000 views in a period of maybe 3 weeks or so, and my subscriber base went from the dozens to the hundreds. Likewise,
Mm-hmm.
I had a second video about that time, which is completely obsolete now, so much so that I've taken it off YouTube. But it was a video on all the various ways that you get a 6 link at league start in preparation for whatever the next league was. I think this might have been just before League happened.
Yeah,
Anyways,
back when 6 links were really really hard to come by, basically.
I mean, really hard is a stretch, but where like a lot less players had them day one. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Uh, you would still have one before level 85 on characters, a non-tabular 6 link. But you probably would not upgrade many 6 links at all in the league. So you get your crappy early one, and then you'd get an upgrade. You get some sort of upgrade later on, which might be your forever gear for the league. So yeah, it might be the second last step you have in your gearing process, might be your third last step or whatever. In any case, it was a significant milestone, and really a lot of it was just going through all the divination cards, whether they were worth target farming or not, whether you should consider trading for them, and so on and so forth. This video went explosive in comparison. It's something like 50,000 views over the time it was up. And the combination of the two videos together put me up to about 2,000 subscribers, at which point invited to the YouTube partner program because I also had the 4,000 watch hours from these videos as well.
Mhm.
And so that meant that I started just making a small amount of money. Like in this stressful period, I'm making a small amount of money and I keep thinking, is this worth taking seriously or not? And for a long period, I'm like, I don't know. So I'm going to keep my options open. I'm just going to keep doing it. And, just sort of making $50 or $80 a month. I'm talking Australian dollars here. So we're talking very small amounts of money. Making $50 or $80 a month and just slowly growing the number of people I've got following me. And I'm like, over time, I think as I start getting more and more sick of my job, I'm like, maybe I'll try this more seriously. And so I think it was Christmas of 2020. I make a decision. I say to myself, all right, I've enough money saved up that if this goes badly, I'm not stuffed. I am going to I'm going to resign from my job in the middle of this year and give content creation a go seriously. By this point, I'd had a couple of months where I'd made like around almost enough to live off. Like, I think cost of living in Australia frugally in a share house like I am is maybe 17, 18 grand a year. And I had a couple of months where I made like $1,000 or so. So I'm like, all right, I'm not making enough to live off, but I'm not that far short of it. And so I thought, all right, I'll give this a go, but I'm giving myself 3 months to talk myself out of it. That 3 months happened. I just got more and more burnt out on my 9 to 5, and I was like, yeah, all right, I'm doing it.
Mhm.
And that's where I was. I mean, it did help the fact that I'd been trying to save a house deposit for a while, and the Australian housing market, I was always $30,000 short of that. So it
Yeah.
meant that I did have a fair amount of money saved, long enough that with how frugally I'm living at the moment, I was under no pressure to work. Like I could have taken 2 years out of the workforce if I
Yeah.
wanted, and never been destitute. I would have been broke, but not. I would have never had any problems in that period.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was in that situation where I guess the short version of to answer your question is stressful period made me make YouTube videos. YouTube videos did unexpectedly well, and this led me to think, well, is this worth trying? I'm sick of my job. I hate aviation now. I want out of this field, and that's where I went.
Yeah. Does having success in some of your earlier videos get to you for later ones if they're not performing as well?
That was hard to balance because like those videos did better than they deserve to do. And I think one of the things that a lot of people that are curious about content creation don't realize is how important a lucky break is. And I had my lucky break early. It's basically hard work gives you the ability to capitalize if a lucky break happens to you, but it does not guarantee that lucky break. Now I got that lucky break, and then after that, I started noticing, well, I'm posting videos and they're getting 600 views, 1,200 views, no repeats of that, lightning in a bottle, 50,000. These videos I thought were better than the ones that got the 50,000. They were genuinely better. It's not just that I thought they were, it's that the 50,000 view video was not very good in hindsight. It just connected well with search terms at the time, uh, with something. People
With
were into.
competition, probably too. And
Yeah. There probably wasn't enough other videos along those lines, and so as a result, it caught lightning in a bottle. Um, it took a bit of getting used to. Nowadays, I tend to have a fairly good sense as to which videos will get. Nowadays, a bad video gets 3 to 6,000 views. So I tend to have a fairly good sense. Okay, this is going to be a 3 to 6,000 view video, but I'm putting it out anyway because my general viewer base will be interested in it, or because a small percentage of the Path of Exile community will be interested in it. It's like I did a video on the history of the Crankled meme yesterday. Like, where did that come from? This is not something that my general viewership don't already know. Like they already know that, most of them. Most of the people subscribed to my channel that have watched 10 or more of my videos know the entire history of where Krangled came from as a word in Path of Exile. But it's something that a few people were interested in and had asked me about over time. So I thought, all right, well, I'll put that out. And so that's sort of not really, that's something I knew would do poorly. On the flip side, something that I thought would do well and actually did a lot better than I thought it would was a video on why Promenade was, arguably I made the case that it's just that the Power Gamers map of choice this league.
Mm-hmm.
And that video I thought was going to get sort of 10 to 15, maybe 20,000 views, and it wound up getting something like 50, which I didn't expect, but still, like that's going to happen from time to time. And so you have a fairly good sense. I'm not gutted when a video underperforms expectations, but that took a while to learn not to be gutted.
Yeah, I still struggle with that some of the time. I got really, the kind of gambler bias where you win a bunch. My first couple of videos, like all of them hit 10K in the first little bit with no, just like off a search. Of course, I had like my heart attack, and so then the timing was over. But it was right at league start that I started, and then it was topics that were then became very, very popular because I was covering like the carrying golem back in the day. So that still haunts me to this day a little bit, because like I feel bad when I can't get 10K on a video. My first couple ones were all able to, even though the environment has changed, even though like there's so many factors that do that, and I know that's not bad or that I shouldn't do that, but it doesn't make me not feel that way. So I don't know how to get over that sometimes. I guess just post more videos that don't do well, and eventually it's like asking girls out or some other thing. You get used to rejection. It's just not a big deal anymore, I guess, right? That's doing enough, get enough load. It's like, it is what it is, right? Maybe I just haven't posted enough. I don't know. So
yeah, I mean, I do a lot of volume, especially around the start of leagues, like as I do a lot of discussion of everything new that's announced in the way of teasers. I'll put out daily videos, and often probably average maybe 1.5 a day in the whole spoiler season, and potentially 3 a week in the week leading up to league start. So that period means that I just have so much volume of videos that I am not fussed when 1 or 2 of them do pretty poorly. Like just looking at my last page full on YouTube, which is, for anyone that's not familiar, that's 30 videos. In terms of things that have really done well, ones that I thought might do better, stuff on how to craft budget grasping males. I was quite surprised didn't do better. So that's one that I thought might have been a 15 to 20,000 type view video, and it capped out around 4.5. But I think there's a lot of seasonality to this game as well. People stop caring about the game after about 6 weeks. A lot of players do. Not everyone.
Yeah, and this league was really bad because of the other competition games that came out. 2 big releases right after it too. So it should be very interesting if people like return, right? Really strong this next one.
So Elden Ring feels like it's a game that you finish and then you don't play again for a while. You might replay it, but when you replay it, it's going to be a lot quicker. And Lost Ark just seems to have been as much of a joke as I expected, which certainly got downvoted a lot in the Path of Exile subreddit for saying that this game looks like it's going to be a pay-to-cheat fiasco. Seems like a lot of people agree with me now.
Well, the grind, like I didn't pay any and I played it and I had a lot of fun with it, but it's either you do 6 hours to 8 hours worth of dailies every day, or you like pay,
or you buy a cheat code to skip the bad content.
Yeah, kind of to a certain extent. And then I kind of felt like, well, what's the point? Or I'm investing too much in this doing the dailies, and I got to make other content, and I'm probably not. I wasn't making Lost Ark content, so spending 6 hours a day on Lost Ark or 4 hours a day on Lost Ark makes no sense if I'm making no Lost Ark videos, right? Doesn't help me. But I had a lot of fun with the game. I think that you should check it out and play it through. Like the graphics and stuff are good, but I just like I think once you then you do all the pay to win stuff and then you get to the gear level, it gets really to the point where like you have a 2% chance to upgrade your gear, and you could roll that if you don't pay money once every 3 days or once a week, and it gets really demoralizing really quickly. And I think a lot of people will just be done when they hit that point.
Yeah. See, the thing that's interesting is that there is a point in Path of Exile as well where you hit a point where your progress is like, you can have a 2% chance to improve a piece of gear and it takes you 3 days of investment to get that 2% chance. The thing is that in Path of Exile, that's been put into the game by the developers because they thought it would make the game more fun. In Lost Ark, it's been put in to get you to buy a cheat code. And that puts me in such a bad mood that I won't start games that have that sort of mechanic in them. I've been burnt too many times.
Well, you don't need that level of gear. Like a lot of people obsess about almost mirror tier gear, but a lot of times you can deck a character out in 3 properties that are useful with 1 benchcraft, and that's good enough. And you're reasonably skilled and learn all the fights, then you probably can do the content.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't
And
even attempt the thing because it's gated in Lost Ark unless you're at a certain item level or hit those things too.
yes. And a lot of games like that tend to have mechanics like hard enrages or healing checks that you just can't. That even if they didn't have the minimum, you must be this tall to enter this ride mechanic in it. It still serves the same purpose. But yeah, I got really into Dungeons and Dragons Online, which is a game that started out not being pay to cheat and then progressively became more over time. So they started selling consumables. Just to try and convert this into Path of Exile. How would you say mnemonic potion? Imagine that there was a consumable that let you replenish all of your 6 portals in a map. So you're running a map,
Mm-hmm.
you get in trouble, and then you can snap your fingers, use this consumable, and you can get additional portals. Imagine that this was originally a 2% drop whenever you completed a quest. Unbound, trade it to other players if you got them, and a lot of players would have a lot of them. That's the way it used to be. Then the game changes into a cash store game, and these consumables get put in the cash store. They still drop from quests, but the drop rate drops to 0.1% instead of 2%. This is the first step. The second step was that they started um, selling now obsolete raid loot in the form of tomes, and then they started selling the second to top tier of tomes in the cash store, and that was when I pretty much gave up on that game. But what tends to happen is that games that start with that sort of monetization might start like DDO did, where it's a mostly quite supportable business model of selling small mini expansions, and then over time they evolve to get more and more focused on selling cheat codes. I've had a look at that game again since, and the levels of cheats that they sell now are bonkers. And the game is designed around pushing you to use them. So the grind is off the charts compared to Path of Exile. Be level 100 in Path of Exile would be the equivalent of doing maybe 5 true reincarnations in DDO. To finish a character, I think takes something like 95 of them. Or you can bypass almost all of one of them for $50 US. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the way that game went. But it didn't start that way. It's moved that way over time. And Lost Ark started at about the level that DDO went with that. And so I had expectations in the gutter. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, no, not worth it. I'm not interested in playing another game like that. And so, maybe it is a great game, but if it is, hopefully at some point they'll bring out a non-cheat based version. It's sort of like they did a bit with Arcade at some point. So I don't believe that went well in the end. But Arcade did have a period where it went from a cheat based game to a reasonably fair one, like buy to play thing after a relaunch. Maybe that'll happen with Lost Ark at some point. At that point, maybe I'll give it a go.
So Lost Ark had a really hilarious thing where they basically just took the other versions of the game and ported it straight over. And then they pretended like they did all this extra work to port it over. They're like, oh, no, 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 we can't release skins and all this stuff. And then someone data mined the actual file thing, and they're just all in there. They're just straight up lying to not release them. It's really, I don't know. I found that like really, really amusing. But I found out about that, like, really, guys. But they just full copied it, and then they make all these excuses. So basically, they're doing some like stuff that are financially beneficial for them, and then just like, oh well, we got it. We haven't ported that over yet, but it's just sitting there. It's there. So it's pretty interesting. But I think that people will have played through it and then done the Lost Ark, and I think a lot of people just skipped this league then as a result, or just didn't play at all. So hopefully the next league, especially if it has a really good mechanic, people will come back and they'll maybe even play longer because they haven't tried the Atlas yet. Is what I'm hoping. So I guess we'll see what happens.
The game did have its highest ever concurrent players this league, though. I think GGG announced that I think it's the first time they cleared 280,000 concurrents. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that number, but it's that ballpark. And that it was a new record setting. My expectations going into this league were exactly what ended up happening from the YouTube perspective. That days 1 to 21 would be solid. 22 and onwards, Elden Ring would overshadow a lot, and that seemed to happen. Seemed to be GGG's expectation as well. If you have a look at the challenges this league, they're meaningfully easier than normal. Well,
yeah.
Let me rephrase that. I don't like getting easier and less grindy confused. They're meaningfully less grindy than usual. Endgame grinds is far easier or far less grindy than at any time since Blight League. And Blight League was the one that went up against World of Warcraft Classic. And then you had Boons of the Atlas 3 is the other endgame grindsy challenge. It's going to be most people's 39th or 40th, with endgame grinds being the other one. Boons of the Atlas 3 is far less grindy than comparable challenges in, say, Scourge League, complete the Blood Crucible to 63 points, which was, I would say, like an enormously larger amount of effort than the ones in this league. I'm still a long way off with the Atlas 3, actually. I'll have 90% endgame grinds, and I'm still a long way off that one.
I don't really care about the challenges. I haven't done them in a while. The last time I did full challenges was back in Beyond League, when you had to play hardcore and softcore to complete them. And I did that, and I was so proud of myself. And the rewards were real trash back then. I got a I got a helmet thing that looks like trash that's gold, but I have one.
Yeah.
I wish they'd like go back and like rework some rewards. Like, here's Nodgard. That'll never happen for like bragging rights, to like make it some sick thing. But I know that's never happening because it's not. It's not monetarily advantageous. So, but yeah,
40. I don't usually do 40.
One of the things that I have a little bit of a problem with is GGG does what they think is best, and sometimes it's not even close to best for content creators, right?
Oh yeah, we're in different businesses ultimately.
Yeah, they are. So it's just like, oh, I hope people still make videos about our stuff. I guess it's like, you know what I mean?
I think if you watch GGG's approach, their approach is like that. So to GGG, we as content creators are playing two main roles. The first one is to advise enfranchised players of Path of Exile, hey, guess what? That game you've played in the past, something big is happening in it. And that is there to funnel people into the big announcement 8 days before the league start. And that's why they reintroduced small teasers. I was really hoping they would do this, and they did. Reintroduce small teasers, and that means that if you're someone that played Path of Exile until Elden Ring came out, and then you just stopped paying attention to Path of Exile at all, but maybe you've subscribed to me, maybe you haven't subscribed to me, but you've watched some of my videos. When I start ratcheting up the level of videos I'm putting out, you will start seeing things again from me in YouTube. that will then remind you, oh, Path of Exile, there's a new expansion coming out. And if you're still interested in the game, you'll then, follow the information to find out more. And then at that point, you will then tune into Twitch. And so one of the things that we do as content creators is we mobilize for that Twitch event. Then that Twitch event is the biggest single advertising thing that Path of Exile has in a quarter, because suddenly the game goes to #1 on Twitch. The Path of Exile official channel goes to #1 on Twitch as well. And that is something a lot of other game studios do, but Path of Exile seem to do better than most. They interest the most enfranchised 50,000 players. They get their attention a week before the release, and they use that as a massive marketing thing. And so in that sense, they want us to still be paying attention to the game, but they don't necessarily have our other interests in heart. It's just that they want us to stick around and keep making content. To some, at least they're okay with some turnover, but they want most of us to stick around, and then they want to be able to use that themselves. I think that's something they've gotten down to a very fine art. They worked that out with Creparian early on. Like, Creparian was a huge part of their early success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when Creparian suggested you should have a set schedule for when leagues are going to start, a reasonably predictable one, they implemented it. They started out with a 4-month schema and then a 3-month one over time. They had to deviate from it sometimes, but that's been their general approach.
Yeah, and I think at this point they realize like there's going to be the hype and then it's going to fall off. But that's like if you think of any other industry out there making content for, nothing has that graph. Like most things don't have that because they're big enough that there's interest year round for it, right?
Yeah, like I would say that my experience, like there's basically, it's not true to say that this is a 7 weeks on, 5 weeks off environment, but it's not that much of an exaggeration to say that. So 3 weeks before league start through to 4 weeks after league start for me is so much busier than 4 weeks after to 9 weeks after.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's assuming a 12-week cycle. It's not, like adjust slightly because it's actually 13 or 14 often. So this one's been 14 weeks. Yeah, that's a very unusual environment, but it's actually quite good as a content creator because it gives you a good time to take a holiday. Like it
Well, it gives
does
you a
that.
good or a bad. It depends on how much money you want to make and how sustained that is, right? And then it also is really weird because it's hard to analyze what you did well versus didn't do well in between cycles because like this one, for instance, obviously it was like a shorter one. It only
Oh yeah,
lasted the 21 day. So you can't really compare success to previous cycle and stuff like that. So it makes it difficult to improve, I think, and it makes it difficult to count on certain amounts of revenue or something like that. It's kind of all over the place. Like you do the best you can. But
yeah. I would not recommend getting into this unless you both have a bit of a history. Like, and I'm talking Australian dollars here. You have a history of making $1,000 a month at least for a little while. Not that you think is reasonably sustainable, and you have something like 10,000 behind you in savings, so that you can weather. And that's assuming you live frugally, like I do. Share house environment. That is the sort of minimum I would say you need to be able to weather those sorts of ups and downs, because you've got to deal with the fact that sometimes there'll be a league that doesn't resonate well with the player base or something, or even that it may resonate with the player base generally, but your viewers don't like it that much, because obviously there's different types of players get attracted to different things within Path of Exile. So if they had a league, let's say, my viewers overwhelmingly have level 90 quarter standard characters, and that's something that they expect to have every league. That sort of section of the player base, if there was something that dramatically changed the axe, so we're not talking PoE 2, but let's say that the 3.18 mechanic was announced, and it was something that was going to make leveling through the axe feel really different and really fresh. If I was to put out content about the leveling experience in it, I think it would do poorly with my audience mostly. Might work with other people, but that's something where my audience in the league may not mesh, even if it ends up being one of the most popular leagues ever to exist. And that's something else you got to factor in. So you got to be able to cope with a bad league, basically, as well as the quiet periods.
Yeah, and like you said, the community that you build, the type of players that you build, it's going to. It's not only just the league, but it's does that line up with who your viewer base is, or
Yeah,
who's going to
yeah,
be playing. Yeah,
yeah.
and that was a problem for the 3.1.15. I think why I really noticed it is because not only was I struggling, but a lot of the people that I had were newer people who were already struggling before they squished the game. So then a lot of them quit too.
Yeah, see, I would have thought that like newer players would have felt it less because the thing that the 3.15 nerfs mostly affected was like once you had 5 or 6 links, until you were on a until you were on a 5 link, the 3.15 nerfs didn't feel very impactful at all. Some of them did, like early mana, like pre 3.15.2 mana, sorry, 3.15.0b, I think it was actually. The mana was really brutal on a 4 link even. But once they changed that, it was very much here's a 20% haircut if you're on a 4 link, but a 50% haircut if you're on a 6 link. That's what it felt like for a lot of
Well,
builds.
some of them it was more severe than that. But think if you're playing a suboptimal build and you're not good at the game and now you have less damage, then you have longer fights, so you're dying more, though, too, is how it. You know what I mean? That 25% makes a much less experience. Even the 50% makes a much longer fight that you're already struggling on if you've set up suboptimally. So, like, that was happening. And then the mana thing. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just meant that you settled into farming 2 to 4 tiers lower than you did previously. So if you're a newer player, so we're assuming that the newer players weren't farming tier 16s previously. If they were previously getting to tier 9s and that was sort of the end of their comfort zone, then their comfort zone would now be, say, tier 6 instead of
And they
tier
don't
9.
like that because they're like, I was just doing tier 9s. Why am I
Well,
doing
yeah,
that? I want to go forwards. That's not a pleasant thing. And a lot of people, and now I can't cast my skills because my mana. Screw this game. Also, I think the league start. They also botched the whole. I think wasn't that the one where they forgot to do the database thing, and then you couldn't play the game.
Was 3.14 was an absolute disaster.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I think 3.15 I had a bunch of disconnects too. So they had like 2 disastrous launches in a combination with it. And
yeah. No, I found the league that was the biggest one for me in terms of struggling was Harvest. I really lost interest in Harvest because it was everything like your character got so powerful and the content to challenge that power didn't exist. And this is with me playing something quite off meta. Like I was playing a Fireballer. Ignite Fireball was not in a very strong spot that league, but it could still trivialize everything even without going nuts on Harvest, like just with fairly basic stuff. And so, you just wound up in this spot where I just don't have access to any good content. I'm just not going to have fun. I don't even think I did 36 challenges that league. And so that would have been much more challenging from my perspective. That would have been my 3.15. It's like, there's nothing really to do in the game. Either I just completely ignore that this easy button exists, and in doing so, basically get locked out of trading for any rarer commodities because people that are playing more efficient builds can always outbid you in that case. Or I just sit around and play other games instead. And that's when I finally got into Civilization 5, which I've been meaning to play for ages.
yeah, for me, that's when I started making content, and I liked it because it was almost like I didn't trade as much that league, and I actually made my own stuff. So I approached it from that, and then like maxing it out.
I needed to trade so much in Harvest, like 34 I'd remove chaoses on on just a cluster jewel. And that was just a starting point of the sort of madness of that league, like the amount that I had to trade. I've never had to trade as much as I did in Harvest. I was all on TFT as well.
Gotcha.
Like I
So
was getting the premium crafts, but I just was not getting the number that was needed to make any meaningful stuff. And I could have brute forced it a bit more by doing by trading for atolls and spamming atolls. Like I think atoll was tier 9 at the time. You just spam atoll and run heaps of them, but that was just as far from my idea of fun as I could imagine. Like making a move speed character to farm atolls. So yeah, I just was like, all right.
yeah, I didn't do any of the trade or whatever, and I just farmed it all out. Basically what I want from the map.
Yeah.
So I played a ton that league, and then I crafted all my gear, and then I made videos on every single gear piece, like what you would do to craft it. So that's like when I started, and that's kind of how I got going.
Oh yeah. I like that when the components for the craft are things that I think people can realistically acquire. Because like it depends on what the actual crafts you were using were, but if it's things like, at this step augment chaos. Now, obviously, augment chaos is a lot more common in Harvest League than even in Ritual League, but it was still something that was like, 1 or 2 per 1,000 maps. Like, to get or maybe no, it's more than that. To get specifically augment chaos, maybe it was 3 per 1,000 maps or something along those lines to get exactly augment chaos. Now you could trade for the seeds in Harvest League, and so you could target farm it a bit more. And if you were buying the right seeds, then you would get a lot more of them. But still, it was going to be rare.
Yeah.
And
actually, I think it was more common than that for me. If you focus the seeds and set up like 5 crops or something, and then just ran those, I think I remember getting a lot of them.
If you're trading for seeds, then yeah.
I just farmed so much and hoarded them early that I had a bunch of the seeds, and then I started just the only thing I was buying was in bulk the seeds, so I would target farm that. So instead of buying the crafts, instead of buying whatever, what I bought was seeds. So I like that dynamic where I bought the seeds and then I planted it and then I kind of made my own item. And I found that really, really appealing. I find this really, very interesting because that was one of my favorite leagues, and that's one of the ones that you made the most. It's so interesting.
It's the most polarizing league in the game's history, I think. It's people loved it or they hated it, and you can see that if you look at the Steam figures from it. Like the Steam figures, you can't get them anymore because you can only get the monthly peaks now. But at the time, someone got the daily ones and uploaded them somewhere that I can't really find on Reddit. But it was really noticeable that it had one of the most rapid fall-offs that a league starter's ever had. But then it had a longer tail where there was clearly a hardcore of players that really liked the league and stayed playing a lot. But the number of people that had walked away from the league by week 2, 3 was really high.
Well, but they made adjustments, so I think they have this mistake that I think it's a mistake at least making. They know what their cycle's like, and they'll implement the league and they'll patch it 2-3 weeks later, and then sometimes they won't. And it's already too late at that point. Like why? You know what I mean? People have given up. Like, well, it's an uninteresting mechanic, and then they don't care about the patch, and they're just done. So the hype's dying.
Well, with Harvest, the early patch was so I think from memory the patch was day 7. I could be wrong on the exact timeline, but the patch increased the frequency of getting the premium crafts considerably. The thing was that even day 1 Harvest was still like you still saw by day 4 of the league every Meritier item in standard that could be crafted, like that didn't have legacy mods on it, was obsoleted by about day 4 of the league. And that was how powerful it was at launch. But then they realized that players were running away from or like were stopping playing. So they made them more common again. And, like that sort of made some sort of people come back saying, oh yeah, let's just live in ultra powerful land and play, with the most powerful items the game will ever see. And some people liked that, but others didn't. Like it didn't seem to do anything to the people that didn't like it. They didn't have any major changes to the mechanics, Archnemesis, they changed too little too late. They needed to go from 64 inventory to 100 at least. That would have fixed everything. I think that would have made the mechanic much better. But really, they can't, like, unless they're willing to have major leaks, they can't reveal the league mechanic more substantially beforehand, and they just don't have the capacity to test it on the scale that's necessary. So, for instance, I don't know whether they realized when they launched Harvest the way they did that by day 4, all standard merit tier items that could still be crafted would be obsoleted.
Well, I think it respected some things for the multi mods that they were not expecting that they also patched. Something like that happened where you can do some clever stuff.
I think you might be thinking about 3.9 and the Awakener's Orb there.
Well,
Uh,
they've messed this up a couple times with
yeah.
with advanced crafts. I think there was something in there too that made it like insanely easy to get way out gear. But the other one that I remember from Harvest was they made the containers that could hold the essence go from 1,000 to 500 or 5,000 or something, which is a big
Yeah.
deal because you're running out of space. So that's one that's like was actually a big deal, I think, because a lot of people it was too hard to get those containers and they couldn't interact and you couldn't hold enough in the space that you got, and that turned a lot of people off. But it's like if you don't have that stuff in the initial, like that's the one that I would say was the bigger
Yeah.
change. That container one, if that would have been in, it might have made the difference. But they always have something that seems to be a little bit off, and they're okay with that, and they're kind of okay with patching it a couple weeks later. Where I think they need to figure out how not to have that.
Yeah, they need to get faster with it. And I think that one thing I think they should have done, this is with 3.9. So we're talking about mechanics changing in a significant way. And this is talking about rewards. 3.9 introduced the Awakener's Orb, and it had a massive. Uh, I'm not going. I don't know if the term bug is right to use or not. An unintended interaction between the Awakener's Orb and metamods. So metamods being things like prefixes cannot change. There were ways that you could get a double influenced item with incursion mods on them, and you could force the incursion mod to survive the process of an Awakener's Orb on it being added, and you could do some absolutely disgustingly OP things with that. So this was only possible for the first 7 or so days of the league, and every merit tier item that was crafted for a weapon at least, every physical weapon that was ever going to be crafted in that league that was merit tier had to be done in the first 7 days, because after that it couldn't have been. What I think they should do in future, if they ever make a mistake like that, they should add a tag to every item that is now a mid-league legacy item, that it cannot be mirrored until it's gone into standard. So make it so that this item cannot have a mirror of Kalandra applied to it until the day they anticipate the league ending. That's something that I think would be really important, because then that means that like mid-league nerfs should happen when they're needed. Like if something desperately needs a mid-league nerf, I think it should get it. But if it doesn't desperately need it, if it's just like if it's something that could wait, then let it wait. But when there's a mid-league nerf that happens that leaves legacy items, that feels so bad from a crafting perspective, and I think that's something they need to fix. And if they can get a policy right there, then that means they've got a bit more flexibility to maybe take small risks as well, like, have something. But they also need to test all of the interactions with the meta mods. Every league, every league that has anything related to crafting on it, they need to test every interaction with meta mods.
What do you think's the worst thing that they've ever overlooked, or the craziest thing you could think of? Is it that interaction? I'll tell you mine really quick. Mine is in the heist league. They messed up when they patched the temple and overbuffed it to where if you had a tier 3 room, it dropped a guarantee mirror shard.
Yep.
Which my group accidentally got that. We thought we got super lucky, and then realized in a patch notes later that, oh no, it wasn't luck at all. It was just deterministic. Wow, that was a pretty big mess up.
Yeah. That one I'd forgotten about. Like, there's been a bunch of things where there's been something that's become meta warping, because it's had ambiguous wording, And let's think auspicious watchstones. So for those of you that didn't play in 316, in 313 to 316, the way that the Atlas worked was different, and you had a different type of customization. And one of the things that you could roll was watchstones that had a mod called Auspicious, which meant that harbingers had a bias towards dropping rarer tiers of their currency shards. And auspicious watchstones for a period were also a ridiculously powerful source of mirror shards. But this is something that was not really it was not detailed in game how well it worked. It was just here's something that changes how things drop, and we're going to let you find out how it works. Those things we have to be able to trust that GGG have balanced them sensibly. Otherwise, they're going to end up being just they're going to infuriate people. Either people will miss out on something ridiculous that's so powerful that it needs to be nerfed, like the temple, or things like that. And that just leaves a bad taste in people's mouth because it feels like it's an unfair playing field. Or they'll leave something in that really does need to be nerfed, and you'll get something economy warping like Heist. A Heist situation with Heist dropped a lot more Regal orbs back then, and so the Regal to Exalt trinkets were far better than they're intended to be now. We're talking so much better that you wouldn't believe it. One point, this was a concerted group effort of traders. So this was not a stable price of exalts, but I think something like day 14 of the league or so, a concerted group doing a price manipulation pushed the exalt to chaos ratio down to 26 for a period. It actually was stable at 60 for a lot of that league.
Yeah.
But they did. There was a concerted effort to push it to 26 at one point.
That's always interesting with the chaos to exalt ratio. What do you think that they should do with that? Should they just let the market does what the market does? Or do you think it needs a vendor pattern to guarantee some sort of a ratio?
I think you should look at the underlying causes of it. And I would love to see a league where there are 5 meta mods, right? Prefixes can't change, suffixes can't change, multi-mod, and what are the other 2? Can't roll attack mods, can't roll caster mods.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see a league where these are denominated in different currencies to each other. Leave multi-mod as exalts because it adds mods to an item. Change the 2 really powerful ones. I would love to see this done. This would be an experiment. Change the 2 really powerful ones from 2 exalts. This prefixes can't be changed, suffixes can't change, to 1 sacred orb, and watch what happens. This would be something that has no effect on. Well, this would be something that would transform the economy because that alone would drop the exalt rate down to 60 or so, and it would cause sacred orbs to shoot to 700 or 800 because power gamers will pay that. Will pay that for access to that craft. But it means that exalted orbs could be used to slam because the opportunity cost has just gone to the gutter on them. You also have divine orbs and annulment orbs, which could also be used to pay for some of the other meta mods. So lots of different options there. I would just love to see one league where they changed those. I'd also like to see one league where they changed the, I was going to say Zana mods, but the Kirak mods, so they're not all denominated in raw K. Let's see what happens when one of them costs 10, or when one of the good ones costs 8 Regal orbs. Just watch what happens.
That would be pretty interesting because it's shake things up a bit. You're a bit of a shaker, huh?
Yeah. I always like when something gets when something gets stale, I like to see it change. And I think that the economy being based around 2 currencies for a very long time, and obviously at some points you will use other things as well, like alterations on tiny things and mirrors on massive trades. But mostly people trade in Chaos Orbs and Exalted Orbs. Change things up. I think Awakened Sextants would become the main currency if you shook things up a lot. Although that said, they're not available until tier 14 maps, so maybe that wouldn't work. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the consequences would be, but it would be fantastic to find out over a period of time. And so, yeah, I think you want to pay attention to who uses each orb overwhelmingly and what they're used for, and just go, all right, let's just change a couple of things and see the consequences. But before it goes live, do also make your own predictions and make sure it's not gonna undermine the trading capabilities of more casual players. And I think that changing the two top meta mods, the affixes can't be changed ones, into costing Sacred Orb instead, would be a really interesting way to do that, because no casual player applies a Sacred Orb to an item.
Mhm.
So them losing the ability to do it because they would go to a 500 to 1,000 chaos. Them losing the ability to do that is no loss to them at all. But they can slam items. But that good 3-mod cluster jewel, well, it's now a 4-mod one. Maybe it's better. Maybe it's meaningfully better. Maybe it isn't, but maybe it's meaningfully better than it was. You want to apply tier 1 bench crafted physical a damage to your weapon? Well, that's a lot cheaper now.
Mhm.
Because the opportunity cost is only someone else not being able to slam an item. It's not you not being able to pay for half of the cost of one of the most powerful crafts in the game.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting in general. We have the mini economy and how it changed, and like you said, just like in the real world, people are trying to fix the market. People are manipulating the market. There's all these little flips and stuff. It's even more volatile actually than the real market for currency, I think, in many ways, right? So
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in this that's allowed in Path of Exile that would be like actual criminal fraud in the real world.
yeah, well, insider trading is essentially knowing what a content creator who's popular is going to make a build on next, hoarding the items, releasing it, and then flipping them. That would be insider trading, right? Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, those sorts of things. Good old
Like,
Mathel effect.
yeah, it's funny. It is worth testing how much of a mathel effect you can have. I've kept an eye on that over time because I always want to be conscious of that if I'm going to recommend a specific craft. I want to think, all right, how much is this going to warp the game's entire economy? And it's one of the reasons I was thinking of doing a crafting video on how to make a ward loop helmet. And I realized that the number of runic crowns with any relevant enchants on the market is so small that I would just warp the game economy entirely if I made that video.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, yeah, you could do it without an enchant on it, but like something like Ice Spear +1 projectile is incredibly powerful. Even something less than that, like 40% damage on a skill it's a reasonably big deal. And a ward loop video that involves using a runic crown with a specific enchant is going to have a huge impact.
Yeah, and just uniques that are like mid-tier level, not even the rare ones, when there's just not too many of them on the market because people don't pick them up, and then hitting a
Oh yeah.
build guide and there's 50 on the market, not because they're not in demand, like will auto inflate the price, or just like early on. This is like
Mm.
the Dark Scorn fiasco
Oh,
where it
it's a tier
tells,
2 rare snake. That's rare.
yeah, well that one in general, its pricing was low, but it's a rarer unique. Yeah, so you can't,
Yeah.
if a lot of people are going to follow it, you have to have the cheapest, most readily available uniques in it. Outside of that, like even that can warp the prices quite tremendously. So
Yeah, I'm very upfront. If a build is going to use even a tier 3 rarity unique, I will make very aware to the person to anyone that's watching it. All right, fair warning. If this build is popular, this item will be 100 chaos on days 1, 2, and 3. Make your decisions accordingly. Have a backup plan. Cold
mhm.
point, tier 3 rarity unique. That's one of them that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it's either
And
super cheap or it's super expensive, right? Depending on how
yeah,
many people
yeah.
are playing stuff and how,
And
and golems and stuff too. So.
tier 2 is 4 times rarer than tier 3, it seems. So Chevron's Wrappings is tier 2. Prism Guardian is tier 2. Not that anyone cares about it anymore, but March of the Legion. These items are all meaningfully rarer. Then you have tier 1, which we don't know exactly how much rarer it is. Some data seems to indicate 2.5 times rarer than tier 2. Some data indicates as much as 4 times rarer. But this includes Martyr of Innocence, and that is a staff that can be incredibly volatile, because it's a strong contender for best in slot for a lot of builds.
Yeah, or at least early on before you're getting some crazy rare items or something like that.
Yeah,
So, or stacking a bunch of other rares to make Void Battery. But Void Battery is also tier 1, isn't it? Or
tier
is it
two
tier 2? It's
void
tier 2.
battery.
So, what is in the tier 1? I don't know what's in the tier 1. So, sometimes
I'll
they
give
should.
you a list, and so this was based upon research done by Poor Fishwife back in 3.14, and I personally believe everything in this list to be true. That said, it is a 3.14 list, so it does not include more recent items, and it also is a little bit unclear about jewels. I generally consider Poor Fishwife's jewel tiers to be like you should reduce the tier number. Oh, sorry, you should increase the tier number by 1. So she calls Unnatural Instinct tier 0. I'm going to call it tier 1, which is the same as Rizlatha's Coil, the same as Badge of the Brotherhood, same
Mm-hmm.
as Great Wolf Talisman, or what's it called? The Rigwald Talisman. What's it?
Well,
Eyes
that
of the
one
Great
only drops from the boss, though, doesn't it?
changed now. Tier 1 drop anywhere.
Oh, it is now? Okay.
Drop anywhere.
I've just never dropped it, so I didn't even know some of these things. Yeah, it's weird how
Yeah.
often they just make these huge changes, and it's so hard to keep up with every little thing. You know what I mean?
That one was announced 3.14. They made a bunch of changes at once. But anyways, that list that I've given you there, I don't know if you bring it up on your screen or if you want to just put a
Well,
link to it.
I'm just recording our cameras, so I can't without messing up the
Oh,
thing.
okay, cool.
So I
Yeah.
can't do that right now. I don't have the tech. The technology is not here. But you could read some of them, like Headhunter. I can't pull it up right now, but
Yeah, okay. So Headhunter is tier 0, which is something that was like I've just opened the wrong document myself. There it is. So tier 0 was Headhunter and Reefbane at the time. Since then, we know that that Mageblood and the Squire have been added to this. And then tier 1, basically everything that has a Pantheon member in the name that feels like a rare item is in there, including some that are bad. So Aberrath's Hooves, Arakali's Fang, which is very good, Garakan's Flight, which is quite good, and also a very volatile price item. Kitava's Feast, which is bad, Light of Linares, which is very underrated, Mother of Innocence, Rizlatha's Coil, both very good items, Shade of Solaris, underrated but good, Sin's Rebirth, not very good, Brine Crown, not very good, Tidebreaker, and Tukahama's Fortress. So they're the ones that were always tier 1 rarity. And then the ones that were added in 3.14, Asnath's Gentle Touch, Badge of the Brotherhood, Beric's Respite, Blunderbore, Divinarius, Doriani's Prototype, Eyes of the Great Wolf, Machinamitz, Malagaro's Virtuosity, Maloney's Mechanism, Marui Equi, Null and Void, Perfidy, Pledge of Hands, Rigwald's Quills, Chevron's Revelation, The Grey Spire, The Harvest, Valako's Sign, Vol's Devotion, and Euphlebian's Trickery. That's the tier 1 rarity tier. And then tier
gotcha.
2 is quite a bit bigger, but just to pull out a few of the highlights, Aegis Aurora, Astromentus, Auxium, Visco's Collar and Leash, Call of the Brotherhood, Cloak of Defiance, Customer's Malice, Hegemony's Era, Hyri's Ire, Impulse's Broken Heart, Calm's Heart, they talk about a has-been item, Mjolnir, Prism Guardian, Chevron's Wrappings, Skyforth, and Soul Taker, Brass Dome, whole bunch of
Yeah.
other stuff, and then a bunch of stuff that used to be League exclusive, like Soul Rest and Rebuke of the Vile were also added there. And then, yeah, tier 3 has a lot in it. Like, we're starting to talk a massive number of items in tier 3, and tier 4 and 5 are even bigger. But,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Interesting.
very big list of
Like
items.
I knew some of them were in the tier 2 or the tier 1 or the tier 0, obviously, but I didn't know some of the other ones were. That it's interesting because a lot of them, I think GGG kind of changes things around, and then some things become good and bad. It's really weird how the whole economy works with manipulation potentially too.
Yeah, I think one of the big factors is that some items, like, rare doesn't mean valuable in Path of Exile,
Yeah,
although there is some correlation, and there is a commonality. At below a certain rarity, an item is worthless. You can take something like the Atsuri Flask. It's the best item Atsuri drops on any difficulty, but it's also basically worthless. yeah, it's still used by a lot of characters because it's best in slot for a lot of builds. Then you have things that are from other sources. Ashes of the Stars, one of the better like the best amulet under 50 exalts for builds that can't use crystallized omniscience. High drop rate, so it's not worth very much. Crystallized omniscience, the best amulet in the game by so much that it's not funny. An item that makes Ulnatol's Vow look like vendor trash. And it is cheap because despite the fact that people are buying them to corrupt them, it still is just too common. Not too common as in too common to be a well-designed item. It's too common to be worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the sort of rarity, though, just because something is rare doesn't mean that it's worth anything. It needs to have demand that outstrips its supply for it to be genuinely valuable. Asenath's Gentle Touch is an example of a good item that even over an entire league the market tends never to get flooded on. Like, people will always want Asenath's Gentle Touch. And so as a result, it's something that tends to hold some value over a whole league because tier 1 rarity is quite rare. On the flip side, you have Chevron's Wrappings. Outstanding item, very widely used, best in slot for a lot of builds, commonly destroyed through double corruption. But even then, it's only really worth a lot early in the league because it's something like 3 to 4 times as common as Asenath's Gentle Touch. And so the softcore trade league, so many items are generated, especially once efficient players get solidly into endgame. So many items get generated that there's just an enormous flood of them. And that only goes up as you start looking at more common items like Cold Iron Point. Again, maybe not quite best in slot, but better than any rares under 50 exalts on physical trappers. It's
Well,
an
if you get the
outstanding.
corruption with I think you can get a spell damage corruption. And it is best in slot, I believe, with that.
You could get a +2 with that corruption, but again, you're starting to get into ridiculous territory.
Yeah, yeah, what's reasonable stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you just get stuff that's absolutely bonkers, and this is, and the base item is really strong too, even if you don't get that corruption. The item is just really strong out of the box. But I think it's like 12 or 14 C at the moment for a corrupted one, for one that's still got its original implicit. And that's such an extraordinarily powerful item, and basically, like, I pick them up as a favor to the player base, not because I'm happy to.
You're doing charity work, picking up them items.
No, seriously, you feel like it on a 12C unique late in the league. Like, the hassle of portaling out to do the trade, you do not feel that that's worth it for 3 Awakened Sextants.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Well, a lot of people still pick up Wisdom Scrolls, you know what I mean? At least they drop in stacks now. Well, but that's what you need to learn about the game. For those listening who still pick up every little thing, the more wealth you get, the faster. Stop picking all your crap up, okay? Stop it. Stop.
Stop picking up single fusing orbs. Stop doing the chaos recipe, except when your league wealth is less than 100 chaos.
Even like 6 sockets. Stop picking up 6 sockets. They're not worth your end of. When you look at the ratio, and the ratio is like 7 jewelers don't even equal a chaos, or like half a chaos, stop picking up the 6 sockets. They're wasting space in your inventory.
Yeah, and remove this stuff from your filter. Now, it is very different at league start when you don't yet have wealth, and also when jewelers orbs and fusing orbs are worth more. But once you're established, once you own a 6-link that's not a tabular and that's not some bad corruption, once you've got okay items in every other slot, like there does not need to be even an exalt spent. At that point, you just want to stop picking up rubbish. It will make you so much faster, and something like 90% of the value of the items in a map, in 100 maps, if you did 100 maps, something like, maybe not 90%, maybe 70% of the value is in the top 2% of the items that a player might consider sellable. And so you definitely just want to don't be afraid to leave mediocre stuff on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, 12C uniques is something, like I say, I don't feel like I'm picking them up because selling them is a useful use of my time. It's not. It's just doing someone a favor, someone that wants that item.
Yeah. Like time is the main equalizer thing that everyone has to share. So a lot of it's about efficiency. How are you spending your time in game?
Yeah. And early league, I will have a dump tab that's 10C. And then over time, I actually start increasing that. And most of it never sells, but sometimes there's just something that's exactly what someone wants. And they'll send me a tell, and it's like, oh, I want to buy this thing from your 26C tab. Maybe they'll have a small number of challenges, and they'll say, hey, would you accept 15? Like, yeah, sure. And like I don't have any problems with that as long as it's not something that I think they're just looking to flip. If it's something that doesn't have much liquidity, but it's just right for them, a ring with a good chunk of dexterity in a non-omniscience league. Like, good chunk of dexterity, some life, and 1 resist. That's perfect for someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we got through all the things that we wanted to get through. So thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything you would like to plug?
Things I'd like to plug. I don't really know at the moment. I'm just trying to think if there's anything that really jumps out. Like, obviously I'll be putting out daily videos during the hype season. So if in terms of just plugging stuff, that'll be the main thing. And otherwise, if you haven't tried running Vile Temples, give them a shot. They were buffed a lot this league, and they're kind of fun. You'll expect to get a lot of silly stuff, like not necessarily valuable, but just stuff that wouldn't otherwise exist. 2 and Blizzard Corrupted Unique, stuff like that. And just try to do something silly with the rest of the league and have a bit of fun.
Cool. All right. Thanks again for joining us. And we'll catch you
Yeah,
guys in the next episode.
catch you around.